I was just refilling the coffee station at Brewster's Cafe when I heard it. That voice, the one that could shatter glass and make grown adults suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere. Patricia Harmon stood at the counter, her finger jabbing toward me like she was identifying a criminal in a lineup. She bellowed loud enough for the entire morning rush crowd to hear that my pants, my perfectly normal work pants, were apparently committing some kind of fashion felony against humanity itself. My name is David Garrett, and I've been working at Brewster's Cafe in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for about 3 years now. I'm 28 years old, with a college degree gathering dust while I figure out my next move. Honestly, the job isn't bad, good tips, flexible schedule, and usually, the customers are pretty decent folks just trying to get their caffeine fix before heading to work. The key word there being usually. Patricia Harmon changed all of that. She was 54 years old, according to the birthday cake someone had ordered for her last month, though she'd thrown a fit because the frosting roses weren't the exact shade of pink she'd envisioned. She worked as the office manager at some insurance company down the street, but the way she carried herself, you'd think she was running a Fortune 500 corporation. Every morning at exactly 7:15, she'd march through our doors with her designer knockoff handbag, Bluetooth earpiece permanently attached to her head like some kind of corporate cyborg, and an attitude that suggested the entire world existed solely to disappoint her. It started small, as these things always do. The first week of January, she complained that I'd given her 16 ounces of foam instead of 14 in her cappuccino. I'm not even sure how she measured that, but there she was, with her phone calculator app, doing the math on foam ratios. The next day, she told my manager, Roger, that I'd stirred her drink counterclockwise instead of clockwise, and that this somehow affected the flavor profile. Roger, bless him, just nodded and promised to address it while rolling his eyes behind her back. Then came the napkin incident. Apparently, I'd handed her napkins with the logo facing down instead of up, which she claimed was unprofessional and reflected poorly on the establishment. She actually took photos and threatened to post them on Yelp over napkin orientation. The woman had turned complaining into an art form, and I was apparently her masterpiece in progress. By the third week, Patricia had complained about the temperature of the plates, the angle at which I placed her silverware, and the fact that I'd said, "Good morning," at 7:16 instead of 7:15 when she walked in. She kept a little notebook where she documented what she called service infractions, writing furiously whenever she thought I'd committed some microscopic offense against her personal code of cafe conduct. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning in late January. I'd been up late helping my roommate move, and yeah, maybe my khaki work pants weren't as crisp as usual. There were some wrinkles around the knees from sitting in the car and possibly a very faint coffee stain near the pocket that was barely visible unless you were looking for it, which, of course, Patricia was. She didn't even wait to place her order. The moment she saw me behind the counter, her eyes locked onto my pants like a hawk spotting a field mouse. Her face went through this fascinating transformation from surprise to disgust to what I can only describe as pure vindictive joy. She'd found her golden ticket, her reason to escalate from petty complaints to full-scale warfare. Patricia's voice cut through the morning chatter like a foghorn. She announced to everyone present that my appearance was unacceptable, unprofessional, and quite possibly a health code violation. She used words like slovenly and unkempt, each syllable dripping with contempt. An elderly couple trying to enjoy their breakfast looked up in alarm, probably thinking something actually serious had happened. But Patricia was just getting warmed up. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my pants, not discreetly either. She was crouching down, getting different angles like she was a crime scene photographer documenting evidence. She narrated her actions too, saying things like, capturing the wrinkle pattern for documentation, and noting the deterioration of professional standards. Other customers were starting to whisper and point, not at me, but at her. She demanded to speak to Roger immediately, but he wasn't in yet. That didn't stop Patricia. She announced she was calling corporate to file a formal complaint. The thing is, Brewster's Cafe is a small, family-owned business. There is no corporate. We tried to explain this to her, but she was already on her phone, apparently Googling our non-existent corporate number. When she couldn't find it, she became convinced we were hiding it from her. Patricia then did something I'll never forget. She stood up on a chair, actually climbed up onto one of our cafe chairs in her pencil skirt and heels, and addressed the entire restaurant. She gave what I can only describe as a sermon about the decline of professional standards in food service. She pointed at my pants repeatedly, calling them a symbol of everything wrong with modern society. She used phrases like, complete breakdown of social fabric, and, this is how civilization crumbles. A teenager in the corner started recording on his phone. Several other customers pulled out their phones, too. But I could tell from their faces they weren't recording me, they were recording her. Patricia, lost in her own righteous fury, didn't seem to notice or care. She was too busy explaining how wrinkled pants were a gateway to complete anarchy. That's when Margaret Brewster herself walked in. Margaret was 71 years old, had owned this cafe for 35 years, and had dealt with every type of customer imaginable. She took one look at Patricia standing on the chair, still mid-rant about my pants being a threat to public safety, and her expression went from confused to amused to absolutely done with this nonsense. Margaret's voice wasn't loud, but it had that quality that made everyone stop and listen. She told Patricia to get down from the chair immediately. Patricia, still caught up in her momentum, actually tried to argue that she was performing a public service. She claimed she was protecting other customers from being exposed to such unprofessional attire. Margaret just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. When Patricia finally climbed down, still clutching her phone full of pants photos, Margaret made an announcement of her own. She informed everyone present that Patricia had been harassing staff members for weeks, that she'd received multiple complaints from employees and customers alike, and that, effective immediately, Patricia was banned from Brewster's Cafe. Permanently. Patricia's face went through several colors, starting with white, then red, then a kind of purple I didn't know human faces could achieve. She sputtered about discrimination, about her rights as a customer, about how she'd been coming here for 2 years and spent thousands of dollars. Margaret just pointed to the door and said 2 words that still make me smile, get out. But Patricia wasn't going down without a fight. She declared she was going to sue for emotional distress, defamation, and, somehow, incredibly, wrongful termination, even though she didn't work there. She pulled out her phone again to call her lawyer. Except, in her fury, she knocked over her oversized purse. The contents spilled everywhere across the floor, and that's when everybody saw them, 3 pairs of pants, tags still on, clearly shoplifted from the department store next door. The security tags were still attached, those big plastic ones that set off alarms. The entire cafe went silent, except for the teenager who whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bruh, she stole those pants." Patricia scrambled to collect her belongings, trying to explain that those were gifts, that she had receipts at home, that this was all a misunderstanding. But one of the other customers had already recognized the pants. Turns out, she worked at that department store and knew they'd had a shoplifter earlier that week. She was already on her phone, calling security. Margaret told Patricia she had 30 seconds to leave before she called the police herself. Patricia tried to grab the stolen pants, but Margaret blocked her, saying they'd be holding on to those as evidence. Patricia let out this strangled shriek of rage and actually tried to lunge for them, but she tripped over her own purse strap and went sprawling onto the floor. The teenager was still recording. By now, half the cafe was recording. Patricia picked herself up, her carefully styled hair now hanging in her face, her blazer crooked, one of her heels broken. She limped toward the door, pausing just long enough to shout that we'd all regret this, that she'd destroy us on social media, that Brewster's Cafe was finished. 20 minutes later, the police arrived. They took the stolen pants, watched the security footage from our cafe that clearly showed Patricia entering with a suspicious bag, and took statements from several witnesses. The teenager even showed them his video, which had already gotten 3,000 views on TikTok. The title was, "Karen Loses It Over Wrinkled Pants While Hiding Stolen Ones." By that afternoon, Patricia had been arrested for shoplifting. The department store pressed charges, and it turned out this wasn't her first offense. She had 2 prior shoplifting convictions from other stores. With this being her 3rd strike, she was facing actual jail time, not just a fine. The local news picked up the story because of the viral video. The headline: Cedar Rapids woman arrested after pants tirade reveals stolen goods. Patricia's employer saw the news coverage and the viral video. Turns out, having your office manager become internet famous for screaming about pants while committing theft isn't great for business. They fired her that same day. Someone from her office later told me they'd been looking for a reason to let her go anyway, since she'd been creating hostile work environment complaints from multiple employees. The court case was swift. Patricia pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. The judge, who had apparently seen the video too, sentenced her to 90 days in jail, 2 years probation, and $5,000 in fines and restitution. As the bailiff led her away, Patricia turned to look at the gallery, and I swear she was still glaring at my pants, which I'd worn to court specifically for the occasion. They were perfectly pressed this time, not a wrinkle in sight.